Hello everyone and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James. On this channel I do reviews of both music and movies, as well as the occasional commentary piece. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then I'd appreciate it if you gave a like to this video and subscribe to my channel to see future content from me. So today is a pretty exciting day for my channel. I am debuting a new series I am naming The Critical Corner. Now, this series will be different from what I do with my typical reviews that you all can see in my past videos. In this series, I get to have a little bit more freedom. I can review multiple albums or multiple movies. And this is the first episode of The Critical Corner. It's certainly not going to be the last because I just can't dedicate a review to every single album. Today, the reviews are going to be all albums, and the albums will be ranging in the time they release. Some will be as early as January that I'm reviewing here, and some will be as recent as just this past Friday. And with that, let's get into the first review.
Don't need no mentions, yeah, these are my only intentions. Shout out to your mom and dad for making you. Standing ovation, they did a great job.
Okay, so to get my negative review, one of my negative reviews out of the way right away, we have Justin Bieber's album Changes. I did not like this album at all. Changes pretty much shows everything that doesn't work about Bieber. His music is just pretty mediocre and forgettable, although there are certainly some moments here that are bad. Yummy is an awful song, as I'm sure most of you would agree with, and there's just not many other tracks that work on here either. I can hardly tell the difference from one track to the next. There's not a whole lot of highlights on here. The album just is not good, not recommended. It's been trashed a lot, so I'm not going to add much to the conversation. 1.5 out of 5 stars for me.
Oh, kill it. Pamela Anderson, Pam Grier. The man's here.
My next review is for the rapper Denzel Curry and his collaboration with Kenny Beats on the album Unlocked. I wish I would have gotten into him a little sooner, because I can tell he has a lot of unique things to say as a rapper, and he's always reinventing himself with every album. Like his last album, Zoo, went sort of back to his Miami roots, and Taboo itself was a pretty dark and brooding concept album. But this album is even different from both of those and sort of has this techno rap flair with a lot of electronic glitchy effects and stuff, and I love it. It's so intense, it's so much fun to listen to, and there's a lot of great flows from Denzel Curry himself, and Kenny Beats' production on this is just immaculate. There's just so much fun to be had here, and I think Denzel Curry is just really great at his craft, one of the best, and is severely underrated. This album more than proves that. My one complaint is that I do wish it was a little bit longer, and that some of the songs were slightly more developed, but I mean, overall, this album is shameless fun. I just can't lie. I enjoyed this album a lot, and I've come back to it. It's easily digestible, and it's a fun way for Denzel Curry to experiment in the way he raps, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Solid 3.5 out of 5 stars on this one. Definitely recommended.
So that I gave it up, but everything I gave was not enough.
Next on the docket is the band Mirage with their album Unseen Relations. This is their second album. Their first album, Lifeline, I enjoyed fairly well. I do think that it has a bit of a problem of relying on one sound throughout it, and it can become a little repetitive after a while. Unseen Relations can suffer from this problem a little bit too, but I don't think it's to as bad of an extent, and plus I think the song ideas here are just more developed. Falling, for an example, which features Tell Smith of The Word Alive, is an excellent track, which really has this chorus that I can't get out of my head. And the beginning track, Rivers, is a wonderful way to begin off the album. Just a great rock number, solid riffs, great lyricism. I just appreciate that the band is showing some vulnerability in their lyrics and making it a lot more raw this time around. Unseen Relations is a solid rock album with several good numbers on it, and even though it can become a little bit repetitive at times, I do think it's an improvement over Lifeline, and I will continue to see what this band does in the future. It's clear they have talent, and I think if they really shake it up, they could become one of the greats in the future. Solid 3.5 out of 5, with a recommendation.
And I shouldn't beg for more, but I don't want it to end.
Back to another negative review, but this is one that I had to talk about at some point. It's Meghan Trainor's album, Treat Myself. I've never liked Meghan Trainor. I've never found her personality to be very fun. In fact, I've found her to be pretty condescending. Unfortunately, this third album, Treat Myself, is a step back. But, I don't know, this album, I guess, doesn't have as many offensive songs as Thank You or Title did. This album more just has the offense of being incredibly forgetful. And this form of pop that she is doing, I don't know, it feels really outdated to me. It feels like something that belongs in the mid-2000s. Like, she's still doing the style of trying to throw back pop to a different time, but people aren't really doing this type of throwback pop anymore. 1.5 out of 5 stars. Not a recommendation. One of the weakest albums I've heard this year.
Always find the trouble, we don't need no help. Seeing, oh, Mama raised me well, but I don't want to go to heaven with.
Okay, next we have Kesha's album High Road. I really loved her last album, Rainbow. I think it's probably her best album to date. It really showed a powerful gravitas to her voice, and I loved how the album was basically a redemption arc for her, that now that she's away from the horrible Dr. Luke and is able to make her own music. It's clear that she has a newfound sense of freedom, and you can still feel that excitement from her on High Road. She is trying a lot of different sounds on this one, some that she's never done before. And then you've got the song Resentment, which features Sturgill Simpson, Brian Wilson, and Rabel, and is one of the best songs of the year. I love how it really leans into this country pop vibe and really balances the sounds very well. Father-daughter dance is especially charming to me and really beautiful, and BFF is actually a really fun, unique song about just a friendship she has with her featured vocalist Rabel. I do think that this album can be a bit of a mess, and production-wise, some of the songs are a bit rough around the edges, especially songs like the opening track Tonight, which really goes all over the place. Still, this is a decent enough album, and while it's not as good as Rainbow, I have returned to it some, and there are specific songs that I think are great within the context of Kesha's discography, so I'll give this one a decent 3 out of 5 stars.
The city's on fire, the streets are a riot. Now look at this place, no one is.
Theory of a Deadman, or should I say Theory? What are you doing with your sound? Not that they've ever been a good band in the first place. I'll just say it, I've never really liked Theory of a Deadman. Say Nothing isn't as bad as Wake Up Call, but man, it is insufferable to get through. There are some moments on here that are pretty funny and aren't meant to be, like Affluenza is almost hilarious and how bad of a mess it is. And I don't think the band realizes their own irony in having a song like History of Violence, which details sexual abuse, but also having a song called Ted Bundy. And the album is just bad pop through and through. One of the worst pop albums I've heard, and whenever they attempt to infuse rock into the album, it becomes even more of a mess. I haven't seen many people who enjoy this album, and for good reason. There's just not too much to enjoy here. It's one of the worst releases of the year. A light 1.5 out of 5 stars for me. Now we have the Amity Affliction. Everyone loves you once you leave them. Now, I've been on a bit of a disappointed streak with Amity lately. Their last album, Misery, I was hoping would be a bit of an improvement over the quite bad This Could Be Heartbreak. Misery, they tried to experiment with pop and it mostly just didn't pan out and still came across as generic, and like Amity was trying to shoehorn pop into their sound and it didn't mix well. I think Everyone Loves You Once You Leave Them is an improvement on both of the past albums, but I still think it's just average at best. I will say that All My Friends Are Dead was a great lead single and is one of the better songs on here. And I also enjoy Forever. I think it's a catchy enough song. Born to Lose is probably the best song on the album. I really like the gritty guitar riff. It reminds me of Beartooth a bit. But there's other songs on here which just really leave me feeling underwhelmed. Soak Me and Bleach is about the most generic check off the boxes for Amity lyrics, Amity sound. You've got it with Soak Me and Bleach. And what really makes this album suffer is how utterly repetitive almost every song is. The choruses in most of these songs just aren't that interesting. And when the chorus doesn't repeat, the songs are still pretty dull. There's just not a whole lot to say here. So, besides a couple of select tracks, this album is mainly average. I don't love it, I don't hate it. It doesn't really do much for me at all. 3 out of 5 stars. I guess a light recommendation. Amity fans will enjoy it, but I can't see people who didn't like Amity's past 2 albums really being swayed too much by this one.
I have brought upon myself. Am I addicted to the misery? Is it
Alright, next we have what is easily the best album I'm reviewing on this segment of Critical Corner. It's Polaris' release, The Death of Me. I really like their debut album, The Mortal Coil. I think it's a super solid metalcore release with a lot of unique ideas, but I think The Death of Me is even better. There are some great moments on this. The opening track, Pray for Rain, really gets things started off on a positive note, and then we've got the wonderful Masochist, which sees the band really going for these clean vocals and a more post-hardcore sound, and it really works for them. And then you've got a track like Vagabond, which is probably one of the best songs of the year, and just how awesome the instrumental is. There's not really any songs I hate or dislike here. There's not a song I would really skip. If there was one complaint, I guess it would be that maybe some of the tracks could have been shortened a little bit, or I would have liked maybe one more track at least to flesh the album out. But those are such minor complaints in what is a lyrically well-written album, a musically intricate release, and just an overall improvement over the band's first album. I can't wait to see what Polaris does next. Strong 4 out of 5 stars, with a recommendation to metalcore fans. This is a band you want to keep your eye on.
you don't know the difference between violence and pain. There's no denying it. You never have control. I stand.
Back to negative review again. Five Finger Death Punch is back with another album, Fate, or F8, and they haven't really improved. Inside Out was a good enough lead single, and I think Brighter Side of Grey is a pretty touching closing track. But beyond that, this album is more of the same from Five Finger Death Punch, just pretty run-of-the-mill guitar riffs and guitar solos, and Ivan Moody has the same super, like, ooh, I'm so mad vocals, but they're just not convincing to me, and the lyrics sound like they're coming from a teenager rather than a 40-year-old man. And Full Circle just sees that typical Five Finger Death Punch sentiment of like, oh, the world is against me, I hate everyone and everything, and it's such an immature mindset to me. If the band was being satirical, maybe a song like this could work. That's what Five Finger Death Punch does so well as a formula, and unfortunately, I'm not on board with the formula, and the lyrics really bog this album down more than anything. Whew, there's some bad ones on here. 2 out of 5 stars. It's at least better than Injustice for None and Gotcha 6, but that's not saying much, is it?
backyard again, watching all the clouds flow by on the wind, and then it hits me.
Next to last review is of a band that I feel is criminally underrated. It's Classic Crime with their album Patterns in the Static. And in fact, I think Patterns in the Static is ever so slightly better than How to Be Human. And I think it's because they make their pop rock sound a little more consistent here. The title track was really great with some of the most thought-provoking lyrics on the album, and the closing song, Before I Woke Up, wow, this song left me absolutely speechless. One of the most lyrically well-written songs of the year. But my favorites on the album is Destroy, Create, where the lead singer just absolutely unleashes on his vocals and really shows his range. As a whole, the album is solid. I do think that there are some times when it can get a little forgettable, like on the song Alien, which just sort of comes and goes without leaving an impact. And the track The Outside doesn't really do much for me either, and even the second song, Highlights, isn't super interesting to me. But still, as a whole, this is a solid album with a lot of really good tracks, and as usual, the Classic Crime has some great lyrics. 3.5 out of 5 stars with a strong recommendation.
I thought that I could shake it, but I know that it's never gonna stop until my heartbeat does. Can't remember.
And our final review of the day is the most recent album to come out. In fact, this just came out this past Friday. It's Silverstein's album, A Beautiful Place to Drown. And I really liked their last album, Dead Reflection. I think it's one of their best releases to date, has some of their best songs, and really showed them embracing this more pop rock slash hardcore sound that I thought was really interesting. So I was interested to see how their newest album would go on with this sound. The first song, Bad Habits, shows that the band is able to use pop to their advantage and create some really catchy grooves and really interesting melodies. And then you've got a song like Burn It Down with Caleb Shomo, which perfectly balances the metal pop flares and makes a song that is both intense and very catchy. And then you've got some really creative songs on here, like Madness, which features a very surprising artist, Princess Nokia. I didn't really think she'd fit on this track, but the way they Silverstein utilizes her is really effective. And then you've got like Say Yes, which is pure pop punk bliss. I think Silverstein does super well whenever they go just pure pop punk. I think they should do that style more. And then you've got Stop, which is probably the best song on the album. Just really does the best job at using intense electronics along with hard-hitting guitar riffs. There's a bit of a part of the album where it gets stuck in a rut, starting with Infinite. I don't think Infinite was that good of a lead single. At least that's the one they were really promoting as the lead single. I just find it very forgettable, and I think they don't use Aaron Gillespie, their featured artist, to the best of their abilities. And then you've got Shapeshift, which just isn't that memorable, and All On Me is probably the weakest track on the album, one of the weakest at least. Still, I do think that Silverstein shows an interesting sound here, and an interesting evolution. I will be interested to see where they take this on their next release. Strong 3.5 out of 5 stars. Wow, that was a lot of talking, but I'm glad to have just talked about all those albums and gotten my thoughts out. What are your thoughts on any of the albums I mentioned here? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you so much for sticking around for the whole video. I will see you all in the next video.